everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. My name is Rachel Harper and I'm the Queensland Touch Football Marketing and Commerce Manager. I just want to go over a few housekeeping rules, just first and foremost. So just to let you know, we are recording this session. So just to make you aware, and then we can share the details with affiliates and so on for those who are unable to attend. I have placed you all on mute. I've just done that so there's minimal interruption and background noise there. A few more people joining. It's all good. I'll just admit those in. Now, if you can please, what would be really great and really beneficial, if you could just in the chat function, which you can locate at the bottom of your screen, just type your name, the affiliate and your position. And that'll just allow us to know exactly who's on this chat. So I'll do an example and you should all be able to see this. Harper, QTF Marketing and Comms. That'll be great. And then we have a register of everyone that's attended. Now, what we're going to do throughout the session, we'll have question time at the conclusion of every topic. Please feel free to send through any questions that you have. We're going to keep it through the chat function just to keep things moving, and I'll ask the questions on your behalf. We'll try and answer all the questions tonight. However, if the answer is unknown or we don't get to it as we run out of time, we'll make sure we come back to the group or come back to the response in the coming days, and we'll also make them available on the QTF website as well, so you can view them at a later date. I'm going to introduce Greg Denny. So Greg is our interim QTF CEO. He's been with us here at Queensland Touch Football for quite a number of years. I'm sure you're all very familiar with Greg. He's been in our General Manager Operations role. I'll hand over to Greg. He's going to chat further as to why we're here, and he's going to run through the agenda for this evening. So Greg, I might handball to you there.
Thanks, Rach. Can everyone hear me all right? All good. A big welcome to everyone. It's probably not lost on some of you, but this week is actually Junior State Cup week. Unfortunately, instead of being in Hervey Bay, we're all in our own locations. So I think it's good to acknowledge, I guess, one of the casualties of this COVID environment, unfortunately, for 220. But as you're well aware, COVID's a very changing landscape that we operate in. It was positive news last week. The Queensland State Government announced the fast tracking of stage 3, the roadmap to easing restrictions in Queensland, which sees the resumption of competitions, including physical contact, on the field from last Friday, the 3rd of July at midday. So that's fantastically exciting news for, I guess, for touch football and for the sports community as a whole, that we have the opportunity to get back up and running in line with the industry COVID safe plan. So tonight, I thought we'd just take an opportunity to get everyone together to give you, I guess, the latest updates. This environment is ever changing. What happened last week doesn't mean it'll be happening this week. So it takes a lot of effort to stay on top of it and just to provide affiliates and volunteers with the information they need to move to return to play. So we understand it's a reasonably complex area. State government have worked hard in partnership with sport to provide an industry plan to make it as easy as possible for sporting organisations to come back with confidence and have reassurance that their competitions can run in a COVID-safe environment. I've taken the opportunity tonight to have a few guests just to provide a little bit more information. We're lucky enough to have Aimee O'Connor, the CEO of TFA, join us tonight. So Aimee, thanks for your time. We will also have John Mullins, from Mullins Lawyers. John's a professional in the sports law industry, just to talk through some of the issues and concerns that are facing sport. I'll also give us an update around some of the changes to stage 3, talk about the guiding principles and the industry plan, and about how affiliates can get back on their return to play. I've always also asked Aimee Best from the Caboolture Touch Association just to talk us through the process they've gone through there around putting a COVID-safe plan from paper into action. So it's great. I might just firstly hand over and welcome Jamie to the conversation. Obviously, touch footy's played across the whole of Australia, and the national landscape is very different in each and every one of those states. Jamie, I wonder if you can provide us an update on what's happening in the national landscape, return to play as all the states come back on board.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I'm off mute. Rach, I'm good to go. Everyone hear me?
Good to go.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, look, Greg touched on a little bit about how ever-changing this environment is and how challenging it is. And that's dealing with one state. Unfortunately, we're dealing with 6 states and two territories. Thankfully, you know, we've got the staff at Queensland Touch and quality staff at New South Wales Touch who are taking, you know, lead on the return to play in their respective locations and dealing with that in partnership with us. It is ever changing. We're seeing, you know, we've all been watching, no doubt, unless you've been under a rock for the last week or 10 days. We're seeing what's happening in Victoria. The Premier down there, Dan Andrews, announcing this afternoon that Melbourne goes into a 6-week lockdown. So that has a significant impact on our affiliates in our centrally managed competitions in Melbourne Central, in Melbourne CBD. And then that's slightly different again with our affiliates that sit outside of that Melbourne CBD. Then you cross the border into SA, who haven't had a case now for, you know, a few dozen days, if not more. And they're back up and running. They have COVID-safe plans in place that need to be approved by health authorities in government. We're seeing some really good results. So I'll just go around the country. We're seeing some really good results in South Australia with a really short turnaround to get a winter competition up and running. They pushed a shortened season in front of City Touch, which is our centrally managed, the major competition in South Australia. They dropped 1 team from last winter, which is a really good result with a really limited lead time. And as we all know, a declining participation across senior demographics across the country. So that's a really good result. Western Australia, we're seeing some really great news out of Broome, who have indicated that they've seen an increase in numbers in a shortened competition, which is about to come to an end, and really strong results indicated for what their summer seasons will look like. WA Metro, most affiliates who have chosen to run a shortened competition across winter have shown positive signs and increases from last year's numbers. Northern Territory have just returned and wrapped up their Darwin competition and have just gone to market for Palmerston, which is about 20 minutes outside of Darwin CBD, if there's such a thing as a CBD in Darwin. And they've seen, so they had 20 or 22 teams in the Palmerston competition, which is relatively small in the scheme of things. Last year, they've got 32 so far, and are still quite some time away from finalising that competition. So to give you, hopefully that gives you a snapshot of the opportunity that sits in front of us as a sport. We're seeing teams come flooding into our sport because they've been starved of what's happening in winter. There are no doubt some challenges around our return to play protocols. We've been fortunate enough that through our partnership with Mater Health, we've had access to their infectious diseases expert who has developed our return to play protocols in partnership with our return to play group that we put in place, which featured Queensland Touch staff, some of the TFA staff, New South Wales Touch staff, and put together some really comprehensive documents and bodies of work, which allows us to come back to play with confidence. So look, it's challenging from a business perspective. Take the opportunity to give you some heads up around what we chose to do. Right from the get-go, we stood all staff down, with the exception of a skeleton team, a couple of leadership staff, myself, Gary Foran as CFO. We retained Alice Ellis from a communications point of view. Nicola Wines stayed on because she was driving the My Sideline project, and Brian Carroll in our business unit was driving another project for us and putting us into a cloud-based accounting system. So we had some specific project staff that we wanted to retain, but we made a really tough early decision that we needed to save and preserve cash as best we could. We didn't know how long we were going to be in this for. And all of our projections was on no winter revenue. So it allowed us to make some of those decisions in support of reduced affiliation fees and the like for the winter seasons that we've just done. Hopefully you take advantage of those if you're talking about or looking to run shortened competitions. That's a great incentive to be able to run something short and get your members and potentially new members back into the sport. The challenge for us now is how do we turn the sport back on without any certainty over what our summer revenue will look like? And that's going to be the biggest challenge for us. We're working through a plan at the moment about turning the sport back on and resourcing it, how we resource it appropriately, who comes back, when they come back, and the like. So there's a large body of work that we need to go through, and we're going through that at the moment. We've got a board meeting towards the end of the month where we'll put a plan up in front of our board and get some sort of certainty as to how we resource the sport leading into summer. We've had some great news, as Greg touched on at the top, great news out of Queensland Government. We knew that was coming. We didn't know was coming, but our hunch from the get-go, and touch wood, we continue to predict the movements of some of these governments. Our hunch from the get-go was that the government would open borders up for Queensland earlier than the September date that Anastasia Palaszczuk was talking about. That's come to fruition. So we've been fortunate enough that we can now get an NYC up and running. It will look significantly different to what it has done previously, but a good opportunity for Queensland regions to be able to be joined by New South Wales regions in a hybrid state championships, national junior champs, whatever ultimately that gets badged as. But looking down the barrel of somewhere between 90 and 110 teams at an NYC with borders open, which is really exciting for us. So exciting for us as an entity, but really exciting for our community to be able to get the sport back up and running with a major event like that. It won't look like any other event we've seen in the past, but if Victorians, sorry, Matt, I can see Matt Gilbertson there, sorry to you, but if the Victorians can wind what they need to do and get that under control, and that doesn't spread across the rest of the nation, Queensland numbers can stay low, our other state numbers can stay low. I've got no doubt the restrictions will continue to wind back further. And I reckon by the time we get to the back end of September, around NYC time, we'll see some level of normality around our events, around the event space. So lots going on. We're all experts now in infectious diseases. We use language that we would never have used before. Great opportunity for us organisationally to think differently about the way that we service the sport. This is one great indicator. To be fair, I'm sick of video conferences, but it's a really great way for us to connect. If it was, I take the choice between a video conference or a life at airports and on airplanes, I'd take video conferencing every day of the week. So it's a really great way for us to be able to connect and stay in contact with our stakeholders that we don't normally get an opportunity to do. But Greg flagged this with me at the back end of last week, and here we are talking to 30 or 40 or 50 key people across the sport in Queensland, which we never get an opportunity. So yes, there's some downside, but there's some really great opportunities in front of us. One of them is getting our people back playing sport.
Thanks, Jamie. I guess just openly, I'd like to acknowledge and thank TFA for their support around the reduced affiliation. I think it's had a significant impact on the sporting landscape and touch football, having that support and the options to run shorter competitions. And I think it's pretty exciting that we can have discussions around events moving forward and an NYC concept, which includes teams from across Australia that can make it. Jamie, there's always questions around insurance, obviously, none more so than some of the challenges that present in the current COVID environment. Can you provide just a brief update in terms of the national insurance plan and coverage to support our affiliates and volunteers in this current landscape?
Yeah, this is a really simple one, Greg. So there's two parts to it. So from a participant point of view, our insurance program is an injury insurance program. So it's not for illness. So if someone catches COVID at an event, they're not covered. That's simple. It's no different to catching a common cold or influenza or pneumonia or any other illness that you might pick up from the touch fields. You're not covered as a participant. But as a volunteer, and I know this is a hot one, and oddly enough, and I forgive me for talking so bluntly, I can't understand why, but this is only coming out of Queensland. The panic that we're hearing about litigation and are we insured and are we not insured, we've answered the question now on a number of occasions. Those people who volunteer for their affiliate, whether they're on a committee or not, are covered, and that's as simple and as blunt as I can put it. I've seen a number of posts across social media about competitions cancelling and the fear of litigation and the use of language around eliminating risk, and I've no doubt that John will touch on this as well. You cannot eliminate risk. It is impossible. The only way that we can eliminate risk of anyone getting hurt or sick or falling down a pothole at a touch football game or at an affiliate or a venue is to not play the sport. It's the only way that you can eliminate risk. You get up in the morning and you have risk associated with your lives. And if we can put it into a little bit of context, there's a population of more than 5 million people in Queensland, and you currently have 2 active cases. One today, which came in, I believe it was today. That was an international traveller who's returned. So you have one, I believe, in Metro North and one in the Gold Coast, and they're both identified. There's no known community transmission. So when you consider that 2 people in a population of 5 million currently have COVID-19, those 2 people are in isolation. They're not going to a touch football venue, so they have no chance of of infecting anybody at a touch football venue. You then mitigate it further by the fact that we have a really sound return to play protocols, which is, we've been banging on about that as a sport, but nationally we've been banging on about it since March. Wash your hands, sanitize footballs. If you're sick, don't come. All of the protocols that are in place that again mitigate the risk of infection at a touch football venue. And then to mitigate it even further, you have an insurance program that covers not an individual, as I said, as a participant. No individual is covered for illness. But if you as affiliates and regions and competition administrators who do a fantastic job across the state, if you are an administrator and you follow protocols to the best of your ability and someone happens to turn up to your venue and infect somebody else, and then they happen to commence litigation against you, and you're found to be responsible for that, or negligent is probably the best word to use. If you're found to be negligent, our insurance cover covers you. So my clear message is we need to stop the panic that seems to be coming through Queensland and get on with the job. There's a great opportunity in front of us to recommence our sport. We need to stop the scare tactics that seems to be floating around and the panic that's been created in the community about the liability that you will personally find yourself in if you happen to be litigated against. It is such a small, and I won't say there's no risk, because there's always a risk, but it is such a small risk. I'm surprised we're talking about it. I understand the fear. I don't want to downplay it. I want to be really clear on that. I understand the fear, but put things in place, follow your return to play protocols, get back out and run the sport, and let's see what happens.
Thanks, Jamie. So we've got a frequently asked questions on the website, which has got the previous communications on insurance that Jamie has sent through, and just some clarification around that. It's probably a good time to move on to John. Just around, John, what can we do as affiliates and volunteers to, if we've got any concerns around risk, to, I guess, mitigate our risk and ensure we're providing a great environment for the return of touch?
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Greg. I've been working with Jamie for quite a long time now over various things, and I've turned him into a lawyer. I don't whether I need to say anything after what he said. But look, I endorse what Jamie has said. There seems to be a little bit of fear mongering going around, and it's not justified. There is risk always, and you can't eliminate risk, but you can mitigate risk. And that's what you do in all of the things that you do on a daily basis within your organisation. So as an organisation, as an association, you've got two potential risks, essentially. You've got the occupier's liability risk, which, you know, somebody comes and hurts themselves on your fields, and there's the risk of negligence. And the mere fact that someone might become injured, indeed, or indeed sick with COVID or any other sickness, doesn't mean you've been negligent and doesn't mean that you can be sued. Now, there's a plethora of plaintiff lawyers out there, as we all know, and there's lots of people who will take on actions. Frankly, they won't take on actions they can't win. So that's the one control point. But the likelihood, if you follow reasonably the return to play protocols, that you'll be sued because someone contracts COVID is as remote as the prospects of you catching COVID in Queensland at the moment with those stats. It's 1 in 5 million possibility. If perchance that happens, you're insured. The issue that participants are not insured is not what we're talking about here. It's been reiterated many times, but I'll repeat it here now. The association liability wording doesn't have exclusions in regards to communicable diseases or specifically COVID-19. Given this, any member, including the safety officers, will be able to seek indemnity under the policy. And Jamie has made clear that all volunteers are covered under the policy. So you have nothing to fear from a financial legal position. We, of course, have all got a moral responsibility to ensure that people playing our sport, watching their kids play, coming to our venues, do so in a safe environment. And what you have is all of the things that you've done for years overlaid with this new pretty overwhelming list of things. But unfortunately, I didn't make them up, Jamie didn't make them up, Greg didn't make them up, we're just lumbered with them. So what you have to do now is sensibly and reasonably attempt to comply with those things. The biggest reputational damage out of this is people like nightclubs in Brisbane last weekend who made no attempt to stop people on dance floors, is people who just show scant disregard for the protocols that are in place. I think it's probably near impossible to comply absolutely with all the protocols, and certainly getting all sorts of names and addresses from people will be difficult. But you've got to make a genuine effort. And that involves probably enlisting some people. And you're not asking them to be on the committee for 3 years, you're asking them to give you an hour whilst they're there otherwise. So you're all very good at enlisting volunteers. You're probably going to have to enlist more than normal. And if you put signs up, if you behave in a certain way, you're going to send a message to people that you're serious about their well-being and you're doing it for them. You're not doing it to avoid liability. You're not doing it to avoid getting sued. You're doing it to comply with the standards that the state and national health departments have set. So if you do the best you can and act reasonably, then you've got nothing to fear from this.
Thanks, John. That's a great segue into a little bit more around the stage 3 roadmap and the guiding principles that were agreed to. So in terms of the industry plans, the field sports in Queensland was the first to have an industry plan approved, which was done under stage 2 return to training. Subsequent to that, there's now about 22 industry plans that have been approved that form a key element under stage 3, working in partnership around return to play. So where there's an industry COVID safe plan that exists, as there is for field sports, it must be followed in order for that activity to be conducted. So that becomes our risk management plan for touch football in this COVID environment. So probably just to start out, I'd say there's loads of documents. This is one of the most highly changing environments I've ever known. From week to week, there could be the creation of multiple documents, some of which have very little relevance to ones that preceded before them. So in terms of an industry expert, the amount of time that we're having to put into this, we're becoming industry experts. I'm lucky enough to have a good contact with the individual that's heading up the field sports plan, so we can ask questions and seek some clarity from time to time, which I think is great, because this isn't all black and white. There's a lot of grey. There's a lot of interpretation that relates to the sport you are, the venue, the size of your venue, the number of participants, the number of fields you might have, that all need to be considered when putting together your version or your adaptation of the COVID safe plan. So I'll just quickly run through the guiding principles. These are available in the COVID safe plan for field sports, which was approved by the Chief Health Officer last week. So the first is contact. So full contact is permitted on the field of play. All other times, participants, coaches and officials and trainers, spectators, are to observe physical distancing requirements and undertake sound hygiene as per the approved COVID safe plan. So we're good to move forward with contact a week earlier than had anticipated. The second one's field facility capacity. So this is one that's changed. So the total number of people to attend an activity, training or competition. Previously this was limited to 100 participants, and there was a variation for training that existed for a number of the field sports. I'll tackle the outdoor component first. So as per previous, physical distancing off the field is the requirement. So there's no magic number that exists. It says risks will be managed through mandatory record keeping, group segmentation and buffer zones where appropriate. Individual organisations and facility managers will be responsible for implementing these requirements in line with the approved industry plan. So in terms of your own plan, which would be adapted from the industry plan, they're going to vary. They're going to vary on the size of your facility. They're going to be dependent on the number of people that come through your facility and what you can manage. So that's the key bit, is mitigating your risk and managing your association really depends on the size, number, and what you can do managing that space. So in terms of facility usage, which is the third item, all elements of community sport are accessible in line with relevant health guidelines and directives. So this just means items like canteens, change rooms, bathrooms, storage room, bars can open and operate in line with industry plans. So some of those would be covered under just the general COVID safe plan for field sports. However, items like canteens have actually their own industry plan that you'd need to consider. But all facilities need to be operated in accordance to one of the industry plans. The fourth one was around events. And I think there might be some changes around this I'm hearing, but essentially championships, carnivals and gala days, so other items that aren't our traditional competition formats. They've developed a scale around the roadmap. So events that are fewer than 500 people, there's no approval process. There's just a checklist you need to go through, and you need to be following an industry approved plan. Events for 500 to 10,000 people, there is a process, an approval process that's in place, and apparently there's going to be some more information that's going to be provided in that space. There are a number of documentations that already exist for people running events. So Jamie, for instance, for TFA, there's documents that are available in terms of what they need to do. But again, it's documenting their risk management for COVID. And there's additional protocols that exist for competitions over or events over 10,000 people. The final two, 5 and 6, just relate to stadia. So crowds above up to 25,000 spectators, which isn't really touch any of our events. And the final one is just compliance with industry and stadia COVID safe plans. So basically says that they need to follow all public health directives and the industry plans in relation to both the activity, facility, and tracing and tracking, including spectators. So they're the rules that guide that are guiding us in terms of the return to play. So there's an industry COVID safe plan for field sports. We're up to version 4. So there are a number of versions. So if there are affiliates that have already developed their COVID safe plan based on an earlier version, they just need to go back and just reference the new version of the document to make sure they've picked up any of the changes. We've put a version up on our website that actually marks up in green the changes that exist in the document to make it as easy as possible. Those that are new can take the field sport COVID safe plan and just make the necessary adjustments to their particular venue and their particular sport and touch football. So they've made it as easy as possible. You know, they're reasonably, a lot of the work's done, and it's really looking at finessing what's relevant to your venue and what you are going to implement to ensure that you've got a safe environment. So we've already updated our website. There's a page there, a COVID page, which has already has all the latest documentation and resources. A lot of the resources that previously existed have been updated. There's a return to play state government document which has been updated. The industry plan's been updated. A previous reference to a checklist which was formerly the return to play readiness checklist is now called the COVID safe plan checklist and appears as an appendices in the field sport. So it's just easy for people to double check that their document meets all the requirements. There is a lot of work. There is a lot of documents. We've tried to pull these together on the website. We'll also update our return to play guidelines. We've got all the guidelines that we've created, all the resources that have been created by TFA that can be used around the facility. So you don't need to necessarily go and update any. If there's ones that don't exist, if you let us know, we'll create more documents to support everyone getting back, returning to play. There isn't a lot of stuff that hasn't been currently created. There's a starting point pretty much invariably wherever you head for people to follow.
So Greg, there's been a lot of questions that we've had come back through the affiliates just in regards to cleaning. So I guess some of them, you know, within these COVID safe plans that they're implementing at their affiliate, one of the questions was, you know, we're unclear of how often public toilets and amenities are required to be cleaned. So for example, you know, if we have a competition night with 3 time slots and 6 games each time slot, can we clean the toilets at the end of the night, or is that something that needs to be done regularly throughout the night?
Okay, that's a good question. And again, the reason there's not something black and white is because potentially it's not a black and white answer. There is reference in the new COVID safe plan for field sports to the work health and safety guide to keeping your workplace safe, clean and healthy, which provides some cleaning measures and requirements. In terms of the wording in the documents, hygiene and cleaning requirements include a thorough cleaning of the venue, including field of play, entry, pitch, coaching equipment, club rooms, toilets, and the wording is prior to any use by user groups. Now, the measures that you put in your COVID safe plan is what is reasonable for the number of people frequenting your venue on any particular time. So the number of people, so for example, if you're running a 2 venue and the toilets are not used very frequently, then once a night may be sufficient for those purposes. If you're running a large affiliate or an event where you've got mass people using toilets, then you need to prepare and organise more cleaning to be provided. So once a night wouldn't be sufficient. So it's up to you to look at what the requirements are. If you can't manage, if it becomes an issue around not managing it and it's an adult night, potentially you could close the toilets. There are always different options for you to look at how you manage your risk and how you use the resources you have at hand.
Greg, can I jump in there?
You certainly may.
What you said there, you used the word more, and I think that's the critical test. There's an expectation in this post-COVID time that we're doing more than we did before. So I think that's a reasonable measure that expectation exists. So I agree with everything you just said, but whatever it was previously, I think they're looking for a bit more.
Yeah. So Greg, just to continue on, just with some other general questions that have come through. And you did touch on this earlier, but just for clarification, you know, how many people are we allowed at the venue? So obviously you alluded to earlier that essentially there is no limit, but social physical distancing of the 1.5 metre rule applies. Can you just provide that further clarification that that is the case?
Sure. So previously under stage 3, there was a restriction of 100, so that's been removed. It's one of the items that overnight disappeared, and in lieu of the fact that people are to manage the expected number of people into their venue in line with what's in their safety plan. So version 4 of the industry plan includes that. That was released last week, and there's more information on the website. So again, it's around what you can manage. If you don't think you can manage what you used to do, within the current resourcing that you have, then it's potential that you might consider some of your options to reduce the number of people, and that might, a lot of venues are looking at running a different night that you wouldn't usually, splitting people up over different nights, changing the way game times are to ensure that not everyone's congregating or arriving at the one time. They're obviously looking at different entry and exit points and parking allocated near fields so that people can literally come in as easy as possible, check in, play their game, check out and head home without congregating around the facility. So although there's no limit, there's always the caveat in there that it's what you can manage as an association.
And I guess, Greg, that's the perfect segue into, I guess, what sign-in is required. So obviously the track and trace that you mentioned what affiliates can manage. So under these current restrictions, what is the sign-in that's required? And is it for just the players, participants? Is it for everybody?
Yeah, sure. I think this is probably one of the more complex areas of the COVID safe plans, the ability to contact trace everyone, so including participants, coaches, officials, parents and spectators. So there is actually a section that's dedicated in the industry plan around contact tracing and examples of what registers are available. And so I'll read it verbatim, but requirements are all players, officials and staff and visitors to a venue or training session are encouraged to subscribe to the COVID tracing app, so that's the government's app, records of attendance at training and competitions to be maintained, records of attendance of spectators at training and competitions to be maintained, records to be kept for 56 days. And it lists, you need a date of entry, first name, surname, phone number, time in, time out, and a club or team. Now, clearly the design of touch football venues makes that an intrinsically difficult task. I think what the COVID safe plan provides a few examples how technology may be able to assist in that process. So they actually list some examples of some commercially available, I guess, contactless trackers, something like Eva Check-in. There's also the potential to set up your own QR code, and that's something that we could certainly assist, that links into a Google's Doc or or alike that allows you to have a check-in code and a check-out code. But it was one of the issues that I spoke to John about previously was, as organisations, what we need to do to proactively manage this process. What we don't want is to find out that somebody has come down with COVID at one of our associations. The health office is looking for a list of participants that were on the venue that day at a particular time, and we don't have it, or we only have part of it. So in that instance, if we didn't have check-in and check-out times, anyone that was at the venue that day could be forced to go into a lockdown sort of scenario. John, did you want to add some more around on what is required for us to meet that?
I think what's required is stated, and that is that everyone who attends, you need to have their contact details. That's going to be difficult. We understand that, and what can you do? You can do the best you can do. But there's a difference between making a token effort and doing the best you can do. If you've got 6 fields with 12 sidelines, perhaps you've got to have one person per field or one person per sideline, or delegate the job to the team managers, depending upon what sides of the field they stand on, to get everyone down that side of the field or associated with their team to sign up. You've got to have a plan that you can justify morally to a government that's trying to stop people get sick. There's no legal liability, but reputationally, you've got to be able to stand up and say, we're allowed to come back and play the game, there were rules, and we complied with the rules. So that's why I say I think you're going to need to enlist some more helpful volunteers and have a strategy around that and have a genuine crack at complying.
It's definitely that. It's the first couple of weeks where you really need to set the rules in place in terms of, if people want to play touch, they need to be part of the solution, and we need to get them involved in doing the right thing. So I think the resourcing will be at the start. So I'm sort of recommending to affiliates, don't necessarily start all your comps at the one time. Let's start off with one of your smaller comps in the first week to give you a chance to make sure that your COVID safe plan, protocols and procedures can be implemented, and you're sure that they work. And where they don't work, it gives you some time to look at what you can do to remedy them to ensure that next week or next time slot for game 9, that you've got things in place. These restrictions are potentially in place, for the immediate future until there's any changes or a vaccine's found. So, we're going to be doing these certainly for the not too distant future as well.
It's foreseeable too, Greg, that the government may form the view that if there's groups that are compliant, they can continue to play, and that there's groups that aren't compliant, they can't play. It's really incumbent upon the organisations to set up, and what you said about setting the standard from day one is absolutely correct. You're no chance of increasing things after you've started it. You've got to start at a high bar level, and not that it's relevant, but I've been many years ago as president of Brisbane Rugby Club, so I know a little bit about volunteers, and I know how difficult what we're saying is. I don't underestimate it for 1 second how difficult it is, but you're going to have a red hot crack at it.
There was another question here around specific entry and exit point requirements, which in the previous plan was a mandatory requirement. It's now down as where possible, so it's ensure and clearly marked separate entry and exit points where possible. So that provides a little bit of latitude, but I guess what we need to make sure is that we don't have masses of people congregating. So if you're going to have only the one entry point and masses of people have got to congregate, then you need to be able to manage that space. If it's easier for you to have separate entry points to ensure people aren't congregating, then that's something you include in your policy.
And it will not be optimal to be trying to get people's name and phone numbers at the entry point. That's almost certainly going to guarantee a bottleneck and an aggregation of people. So you're all smart people. You all know your venues. You all know your sport. Make good decisions based upon these guidelines.
So one of the documents that is in our return to play stuff on the website is a venue map, and it's an example of a mud map where part of this is how you communicate to your members, to your teams, to your players, what you want them to do to help. And if you've got a nice clear map that clearly articulates entry and exit points, you know, where the sanitation stations are and alike, you know, the clubhouse is closed or whatever it is, you give really simple messages so that what they can do to help is when you arrive, there'll be a check-in. Can you please check in, play your game, check out once you finish your game, and put the responsibility back on them as much as possible to help you deliver your plan. I think the nice clear communications around what they need to do to help Touch proceed is really important. There's some other, sorry, Rach.
No, so just on that, so if we take a step back, I've just got a question here. So taking a step back, who needs to have the COVID safety plan? So is it the organisation that has the user agreement with the council landowner, or can we ask individual clubs, coaches to have their own safety plan?
Look, the responsibility rests with the organisation that's using the facility. There's some reference in the new COVID safe plan around dual use facilities in terms of multiple sports use, and they'll potentially have 2 different plans. We've had some other questions around, you know, if there's a clubhouse that's used for both sports, what do we do in that place? I think they'll both have their own COVID safe plans for that environment.
Yep, and I've got another one. Jamie, this one might be more directed towards yourself. With insurance, the certificate of currency goes until the end of September. Is there any reason for that? Just suggesting that there's a bit of paperwork applying to local authority, you know, for October onwards and so forth.
The quick answer and the easy answer is we got an extension to our insurance program from finishing in July, end of June, which is where your certificate of currency would normally lapse, and an extension on the certificate of currency is out until September. Your next ones would be issued for October until the end of June 2021.
Hopefully that answers a few of your questions. If you do have any more questions, feel free just to send them through the chat. It's open forum. If you have any pressing, as I said, if we can't answer them, we'll come back to you. But this is your opportunity to get the questions out there.
Okay, we might, if you've got any questions, please fill them, send them through to Rachel, and we can address those. I thought I've invited Aimee Bess from Caboolture Touch. Aimee's the association manager, just to talk us through what process they've been through at the club to, I guess, initially start their COVID safe plan, which they did for return to training, and then obviously they will need, or they're going through a process of obviously updating it in terms of return to play. So I thought it would just be a good opportunity just to show or hear from an affiliate out there doing what you need to do and how they've gone through the process. So Aimee, can you just take us through, I guess, where you started in terms of your COVID safe plan and with your committee?
Hey, hi everybody. So I'm sure everybody's in the same boat as we were, in that everyone's been watching COVID avidly and all the announcements from the Queensland Government just to find out where we were at with the roadmaps, and that was probably our first process. So when we started our COVID plan still in stage 2, we had our main meeting, I think it was the 9th or 10th of June, to start that process. So we were still under quite heavy restrictions. We created a dedicated group that was our COVID crew. It had 4 of us in it. Myself, Herb, the president, Lloyd, the vice president, but also one of our other committee members, Steve. He became our COVID safety officer. We had that from the get-go. When we got together, we made sure we knew what we wanted to achieve from it. So for us, it was immediately being able to get some sort of training back on the park, because that's where the restrictions had us placed at the time when we set. As thought it may be. So the template that's on the TFA website or the QTF website, it's pretty much cut and paste to an extent. We ended up getting everybody into the room together, all those 4 people, and we did like a brainstorming session directly in line with that template, working out what we needed to change, and did it almost like a live document. Take about 2.5 hours. It was a big process, but it didn't seem as scary once we were all together working on that. Following on from that, we ended up meeting again in a couple of days to actually do a walkthrough at the fields and physically get our plan out on the park to make sure what we proposed in that plan was achievable. That didn't take as long, and it just let us iron out a couple of the different things on our mud map to make it more user-friendly for us. The main challenges that we found once we did our first session, in our first session we started small, and that's probably the biggest recommendation too, is start small so that you do have an opportunity to catch any things that might be improved or could be done differently. So on the 21st of June, we ran our Women in Touch program, which is one of our smaller programs. It worked really well in that it was a smaller session. Everyone was so happy to get back on the field that they would have jumped through hoops and pyjamas if we wanted them to, just to get back out there. So I think that's the other plus we have in our favour, is most of our members just want to play, so they will help us out. Volunteers were a big concern for us, I'm sure, like everybody else, which is why we insisted on starting small with the Women in Touch, and we made sure we put a call out for volunteers. We did identify simple things at that first session, like making sure there was a sanitising station in front of their water bottles. Something as simple as that was something that probably wasn't definitely on the plan, just because the women didn't think about it themselves, but now we've got that in place. There's just little things like that are easy to work out if you've got a test run like that. For the next session that we did, we started our academy for our juniors, because that was our next priority, was getting our juniors back on the field. The volunteers for that were a little bit more daunting, but when we sent out communication to our members to tell them that the academy was coming back, we also included the link for the COVID online course that's on the websites and requested that parents assist, and we got a fairly good feedback from that. I ended up with too many marshal volunteers, which is a really good thing to say for our first academy session. And it did work quite well. Probably the most important things that I could suggest to anybody doing this is communication's really important with your members and with the people involved in the plan. As long as we tell in the communications to our members what we expect of them and what we actually need them to do to be able to continue, everyone's been really compliant so far. We've been quite lucky in that respect. Like I said, I think the passion to get back on the fields is making everybody a lot more agreeable, if that makes sense. Any other advice is don't be overwhelmed by the size of the document. It does look quite daunting, but when you start to go through it, it's designed for you to succeed, if that makes sense, in that a lot of it is self-explanatory. It's telling you the answers that it wants on there. It's a matter of you making sure that you can work it to what you can achieve. Ask for help. Definitely use social media and word of mouth to get help from your volunteers. That's a huge thing. And speak to the region's affiliates and the state body for help. It's been really good for us. Communication is probably the only other thing, and everyone's stressing that the most, is communication is a huge thing with your members and with your committees and your volunteers. Is the more you can keep everybody informed, the more they understand the implications of what you're asking them and why we're asking them to do what they're asking. So that's about it, unless anyone's got questions.
Are there any questions there for Aimee, Rachel?
No, Aimee, I think that's great. I'm just reassuring everybody that, you know, it's not as scary as it seems. And, you know, the government does want us back out on the park. They are encouraging us, obviously in a COVID safe environment. But that's really great to hear that you're able to put this plan into practice, which is, you know, what we want everyone to be able to achieve. So that's great.
Thanks, Rach.
Yeah, don't be daunted by the whole picture. Break it down into the smaller elements and it's a lot easier to manage. And if anybody does have any questions, or our plan is on the website, and if anyone does need ask questions or anything later, they're more than welcome to contact me.
Thanks heaps, Amy. I've had several affiliates contact me for COVID safe plans, and what I've tried to do is provide a plan that's of the size of an affiliate that's similar to yours. There's no point giving you a massive big plan that relates to a 10 field venue when you're only 2 fields. So we're just trying to make sure we provide some documentation that is relevant. So the first port of call, potentially we'll send out some comms tomorrow, but for anyone is to review the latest approved industry plan, which is version 4. And there's only just some small areas in there that need to be updated. They're highlighted in green, as I mentioned. You may not get, as Amy said, you may not get everything right the first time, 100%. There'll be things you need to work on. The plan may change. You may need to say that we tried that and it didn't really work. We need a different process. Go back, revise your plan, and update your plan. At the end of the day, I chatted to Alison that heads up the field sports committee, and hers was, you make your plan. It's really of how you implement that plan that's really important. How you're going to go about taking that from a piece of paper into making sure that your teams, your volunteers, your participants, everyone's working together to make sure we can get back to play sport. So that's a really key bit. Sorry, Rach, was there another question that came up before?
Yeah, we've just got one other question that's come through, and it's just in regards to that check-in the attendance register contact tracing. So basically, can this replace the sign-on sheets, or do we need to do both?
The requirement is, the tricky bit is that we tend to know who the players, the coaches and the officials are. So that's fine, but we still need to identify who the spectators and the parents and the like are. So if you think that's the way forward, you have a process for those in the field of play and something for out of field play. If that's something that works for your affiliate and you believe you can manage, then you can proceed that way. It's like, there's been other questions that have been raised around, you know, if we've got fields that are really close together and the sub boxes are close together, you just need to look at your particular venue and say, okay, can we manage that situation to social distance? Is there an option to put them on a different side of the field? If there's not, can we stagger a sub box in a different location? Spread the people out. Look at what's relevant to your particular venue. Everyone's different. You just need to look at what you can do to make sure we meet the requirements in the plan.
I do actually have one directed for you, Amy. So did you have any strategies to capture the details of the spectators and parents? I'm not sure if they were allowed when that was run, but you know, were there any strategies that you had in place to make sure you got those details?
Yeah, so with the first one that we did on the Women in Touch session, we pre-populated a form with the details of the players that we were targeting for the Women in Touch, obviously women aged between 15 and 50 or 60, so that when they came, it was a simple matter of checking the details were correct, asking those questions and ticking them off as attending. The other thing that we've done is we've created an attendance form, because our concern around juniors was that you're getting kids of 8 and 9 coming up. So at this stage, they weren't allowed to have parents attend as well. They had to be dropped off, or no spectators watch from cars. So we were concerned that these kids wouldn't understand the questions that were being asked of them, etc. So we've created a form which is online, which has the parents' details, the contact details, the child's name, etc., and then has those questions to be pre-filled in by the parent. When the child comes, they hand the form in, put it in a box, and that way we know that there's valid information that is viable for them.
So Amy, just on that one, those questions that were in the original form, I think have been updated as well. So you might just need to check. That's the question around the 14 days, because I think it might include, have you been to Victoria or something like that. It's only a small thing, but yeah, that's in there as well.
Yeah, definitely. We may just change it to be, have you been out of Queensland in the last 14 days?
So we might, Greg, just keeping an eye on the time. I've got one more question here, and which I'll put forward, and then we can wrap up the session if you like. But this one is in regards to, I guess, multiple roles at the venue. So are volunteers able to play as well as undertake COVID-19 responsibilities throughout the competition night?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've had similar questions around, can referees play? What the COVID Safe plan says is that they want to minimise commingling. So what we don't want after a touch match is two groups of teams getting together and commingling each other. In terms of a referee that is playing a game, they just need to finish their game. They'll do the required hygiene protocols, get changed if they need to, and move into the next space. There's no reason for them to leave the venue as such or recheck in. What we don't want is referees congregating around together. They just need to be cognizant of the fact that there's social distancing required. What was the specific one, Rach?
I think that the question was, can you be a player and can you be a volunteer? And the answer is yes.
Yes, you can. Yeah. Yeah.
I think the reality is, in most sports, that will be the case, that people will have different roles. We just need to make sure that we're following hygiene protocols, social distancing, and not congregating is the key piece.
Yep. Okay, well, I think that concludes the session for this evening. If we have missed your question or it's yet to be answered, we'll take it away, provide further information. I know there was some info coming through about QR codes. We do have a contact and tracing webpage on the QTF site, which actually provides some details surrounding that, so how you can best capture those attendance records and so forth, and I'll provide some further information to you on that one. As Greg alluded to, we will send out some comms tomorrow, and this will focus on the revised Queensland Touch Football Return to Play guidelines and the COVID industry plan template. And as Greg said, it will be highlighted in green, the updated additions from stage 3, so you can easily cross-reference that with your existing plan, so you don't have to start from scratch. But on behalf of Queensland Touch Football, I just want to say thank you very much to our guests this evening. So Jamie, John, Aimee, thank you very much for taking the time out this evening. It's greatly appreciated. And also a huge thanks and appreciation to our affiliates and volunteers. So just for all your ongoing efforts, it's very difficult and challenging times. And, as we move through this together, we're here to support one another, reach out to your region, your affiliates, us, TFA, like we're all here to support you. But we hope you found this valuable and we look forward to seeing everyone back on the field, hopefully sooner rather than later. But if you do have any further questions, you can of course email myself or Greg and we'll come back to you. And lastly, I just want to say we're planning on doing a My Sideline Zoom session next week. So further information will come out about that. We just think it's a great way to get everyone online and sharing in this space. So Greg, unless you had anything further, thank you all very much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time. Thank you, Rachel.